Have you ever given much thought to how Jesus really lived his life while here on earth, the human qualities and lessons on humanity he left behind? The creator behind the widely successful daily audio Bible podcast, Brian Hardin, has written this new book called Sneezing Jesus: How God Redeems Our Humanity, and explores the lessons of what normal humanity is supposed to look like. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you.
So tell us, why write this book? And Sneezing Jesus, why that title?
I mean, Sneezing Jesus is a disruptive title on purpose, but it comes from something that I think is even more disruptive, and that is who Jesus was, the human God. And as I began to think about what would be the one word that describes Jesus, I literally had pages of attributes and was just crossing them off, and human was the one that, for me, I identified most with Jesus. And so Jesus was the human God. So Sneezing Jesus kind of comes from sneezing is a human thing that we do. It's a way of spreading things, and it defines humanity because we all do it, sneezing Jesus.
And you also talk in the book about the fact that when we sneeze, we leave germs everywhere, right? And the fact that everywhere we go, any interaction that we have, we should leave Jesus wherever we go as well.
Yeah, I mean, Sneezing Jesus evokes the humanity, but its ultimate mission is exactly that. When we expel a sneeze, we can make people sick. And I began to start thinking, what if we could do the same thing in reverse? What if we could infect the world with light and good news? And what would that look like if it became an epidemic? You know, what would it be like if good flooded the world and began to overwhelm things? Because that is the kind of humanity and the kind of world that Jesus seems to be describing throughout his ministry.
As I was reading this book, it reminded me of Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin.
Yeah.
And the fact that Jesus lived this earth just as you and I. He was a human being. He was born of a woman, but he showed us how to live life well. He showed us that we didn't have to sin, that there were possibilities that we could expound, that we could live through without falling, without sinning. And that's what I appreciated about this book, is the reminder of that. Is that the focus, is just reminding us of the possibilities, of the expectations that we have?
Yeah, because we see in Jesus what humanity is supposed to look like. And what I mean by that is that Jesus was the first person without sin, or the first person completely integrated with his Father to walk on this planet since Adam and Eve. And so when we see Jesus in this world, we're seeing a person that is more normal, that is more what God intended humanity to be, than what we find in our own lives most every day. And so Jesus operated in a fallen world in the way humanity was created to be, and then he sacrificed himself to offer that exact life to us. And so, yeah, Jesus shows us how to be human.
I want to read from page 90, because again, I've been underlining most of this book, but I love what you say here. The Son of the Sovereign God bowed before his creation, humbling himself and washing away the filth of where they'd been. You're talking about the Last Supper. Jesus decides that he's going to wash the feet of his disciples. And he's in this posture of, God having all the filth all over him.
Yeah.
And the challenge is that we in our life also react that way, that we are not afraid to wash somebody's feet. We're not afraid to listen to somebody. We're not afraid to talk to them and allow them to be real with us. That is a part of allowing that filth to be on us. Explain that.
Well, I mean, when Jesus washed the feet of his disciples, that would have been an uncomfortable situation for his disciples, because they believed him to be the heaven-sent king. Kings don't bow before anyone, and here is the Son of the Sovereign God. Here is God incarnate on his knees, washing the filth from his friends' lives. but it's in the context of Jesus trying to show them one last example of what their lives are supposed to look like before he goes to the cross. And when he gets done with that, he says, "Do you know what I've just done?" And I love that because it's so complicated. He's done a lot in that moment. But he says, you know, if I am your Lord and teacher, then servants are not greater than their masters. And if I have done this for you, then you should do this for one another. This is how you will find happiness and blessing from God. That's a vast juxtaposition between Jesus' view of happiness and what we do to achieve it. And so Jesus just continues throughout his life to show us not only how we've gotten it backwards, but how we can right it, how we can live a truly full human life.
I know we only have seconds left, but I need to ask you this question. I know everybody's going to be upset at me for asking this, but isolation, that was one of the parts that really honed in for me and touched me.
Yeah.
As Jesus is on this cross, you paint this picture of the last interaction he had with one of his disciples was this kiss from Judas,
Right.
what was a betrayal. And the fact that all of a sudden Jesus was isolated. How many times have we felt isolated and we
Right.
feel like God doesn't understand, God's not
Right.
there, but God experienced isolation. Powerful.
Absolutely. And, you know, I've thought about that scene, and I've thought about the Father's heart a lot. And I know what my interaction with God is like, and I see him as someone who is passionately in love and waiting for people to simply come home. How lonely that must be even now. But when we look at the last, to answer your question, when we look at the last days of Jesus' life, we see that he has endured all of the kinds of things that we continually say, you just don't understand.
Yeah.
It's really hard to read into the Gospels the last days of Jesus' life and say that anymore. He does understand. Whatever we've gone through, Jesus has gone through as well.
Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you for writing this book.
Thank you.
We want to get this amazing book into your hands. And when you call to get your copy, you are also supporting the work here at 100 Huntley Street. Here's how you can get your copy today.